The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good afternoon and a warm welcome to all. I am Ridul Mishra and on behalf of Care Ratings welcome you to our industry webinar series. Today we'll be discussing on cement poised for concrete growth trajectory. We appreciate your time in joining us for this webinar. To take you further on this, may I introduce our speakers for today. We have with us Mr. Milind Gadkari, Senior Director at Care Ratings Limited. Mr. Milind has more than 20 years of experience in rating industry, rating corporates, finance sector companies, securitization ratings, and so on. He's a member of the rating committee at Care Ratings. Our second speaker for today is Radhika Ramabhadran, who would be joining us from our Hyderabad office. Radhika is a senior manager at Care Ratings, having over 8 years of experience. She is involved in ratings of large and medium corporates across several sectors: cement, infra, road, pharma, etc. She is a sector specialist for cement and is a qualified chartered accountant and company secretary. Our third speaker for today is Ashish Nainan. Ashish is working with Care Ratings as research analyst and is part of our industry research team. I would like to inform, as always, the discussion is in form of a presentation which is visible on your screen. In case of queries, please key in the questions in the slot provided. We'll be having a Q&A session at the end of the presentation. I repeat, in case of queries, please key in the questions in the slot provided. We'll be having a Q&A session at the end of the presentation. Now, may I request Mr. Milind to begin the session?
Thank you, Mridul. India is the second largest producer of cement in the world. Cement is one of the core industries which plays a vital role in the growth of a nation. The industry occupies an important place in the Indian economy because of its strong linkages to various other sectors such as construction, transportation, coal, and power. India has a lot of potential for development in the infrastructure and construction sector, and the cement sector is expected to largely benefit from it. Some of the recent major initiatives such as Housing for All, Sagarmala, Bharatmala, development of 100 smart cities are expected to provide a major boost to the sector. In this webinar, we would be covering the global and domestic cement industry, fundamentals of the industry in India, demand drivers, etc. We would also touch upon the financial performance of the major players in the sector and thereafter discuss about the key drivers with a credit ratings perspective and challenges faced by the sector. With this, now I would request Ashish to take forward the presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Gadkari, and a very good afternoon to all. We will begin with this webinar, and I would like to start with the global cement industry. When we talk about the global cement industry, the overall capacity globally would be around 5.6 billion tons. The cement production in 2017 stood at around 4.1 billion tons. Among the countries, if I am to talk in particular, China absolutely has the largest production level in the world, contributing to almost 59% of the world output. So China currently produces over half of the world's cement, followed by India with around 270 million tons, and USA at 86 million tons, and Vietnam and Turkey at 78 and 77 million tons respectively. Now, if we are to talk about the global outlook, like I said before, the total capacity stands at around 5.6 billion tons. And over the next year, we expect that recovery in developed markets like Europe and USA is expected to trigger the demand. Now, like we spoke about it, China, which has almost half the capacity and occupies more than half the production in the entire world, would see some of its expansion being tapered off over the next years, so 2018 and 19, since the country is focusing on eliminating some of its excess capacity. India ranks second in terms of production and consumption of cement after China, and USA and Europe are emphasized to follow Asia on improved momentum. The other key markets where we would see some kind of recovery on the global front would be Russia and Middle East. And this comes on the back of some improvement in oil prices. Now, I'd like to cover the Indian markets in particular. And like I said, India is the second largest cement producer after China with production capacity of around 450 to 460 million tons as in 2016-17. And this has grown from 438 million tons in the year 2015-16. Now, India is also the second largest cement consumer across the world. Even though we are the second largest producer and in terms of capacity, when we talk about the per capita cement consumption, it is abysmally low. So India's per capita cement consumption stands somewhere around 200 to 220 kg as of now. And when we look at it globally, or even when we compare it with countries like China, who have a per capita consumption of 520 to 530 kgs. Now, the Indian cement industry plays a very key role in the national economy, and it is highly positively correlated to the GDP growth rate of the country. So it is not only it generates a substantial revenue for the state and central government, but it is also a key industry in terms of employment. Now, cement demand, when we talk about the demand, it is derived from some of the major construction and related industries like real estate, infrastructure, and the industrial sector. So the performance of the cement industry is therefore largely dependent on the overall economic growth of the country. And unlike the global scenario, the Indian cement industry is highly fragmented. So, however, in the recent past, we have seen the industry witnessing some kind of consolidation with some of the deals which happened sometime in 2013-14 with Ultratech purchasing two of JP's cement plants of around 20 million tons, and Birla Corporation acquiring Reliance Cement, Orient Cement Limited acquiring assets of some of the assets of Jayaprakash Group. Uh, One consolidation which was called off thereafter was the ACC Ambuja merger. And the latest among the consolidation moves would be the Ultratech and Dalmia Bharat trying to take over Binani Cement, which is a process under NCLT. Uh, when I talk about the markets on the broader terms, the top 10 cement companies account for almost 65% of the cement market. So Ultratech leads by a huge margin with 93 million tons, followed by the Holcim Group, that is ACC and Ambuja. And the gap between the largest manufacturer, that is Ultratech, and the second largest has widened to nearly 30 million tons as of now. Now, when we talk about, I touched upon the capacity and production and consumption. So, last year we saw the production inching closer to around 270 million tons, which was a bit lower than the previous year's production of around 274. And the overall capacity addition stood at around 21 million tons in the year 2016-17. So it grew from 439 to 460 in the year 2016-17. Now, I'd like to touch upon the demand drivers in the industry for the cement industry. Now, if we look at cement as an industry in particular, it is a very demand-driven industry, and hence, for the capacity utilization to take place, it is important that all the underlying industries perform here. So, like I said, for the cement industry in India, the major drivers as sectors would be real estate, public infra or infra in particular, and the commercial and the industrial part. Now, the housing sector alone contributes to some 67% of the entire capacity or the demand for this sector, followed by 13 to 14% from infrastructure, and closely followed by 11 and 9% for commercial and industrial. Now, when we talk about housing in particular, real estate, I think what is going to be the driver from this segment, which has been witnessing some kind of a blip over the past 3 to 4 years. So, the government's effort to boost affordable housing and announcing various tax incentives will continue to attract more prominent, some kind of demand from this category in real estate. So we have this Pradhan Mantri Awas Yojana where they are hoping to construct some 5 to 6 million homes over the next few years, and the overall outlays is around $5 to $6 billion. So I think this is going to be one of the major growth drivers, and this is where the real estate market is going to somehow drive the demand. In terms of infrastructure, I think India has a lot of potential in terms of development in the infrastructure segment. And this would come from the 98 smart cities or the 100 smart cities, which are expected to come from the government of India. And some of the key schemes for the roads and ports projects, particularly Bharatmala and Sagarmala, would be contributing to the overall demand area. So these are the three key areas where I think the demand for cement would be driven over the next 2 to 3 years. And we can also expect some measures like urbanization under the Amrit scheme to help in the demand wherein the incremental demand is going expected to come. Having touched upon the consumption and the production, I think the next key area to discuss is about the regional capacity mix. And like most of you might already know that the overall cement in the country is divided into 5 regions. So one third of the total production capacity in the country is concentrated in the southern region, and which is followed by northern region, which constitutes for 22%, followed by western region at 16.6%, and the eastern and central following at 14.7 and 13% respectively. Now, like we can already see, the south houses the highest capacity, and when we talk about the north follows next. So infrastructure is the key demand driver for this region over housing. So south is more retail driven, followed by infrastructure, whereas the northern region is more about the infrastructure, which is the key demand driver. When we talk about Western region, which contributes to around 16%, in terms of capacity utilization, this region is key as the capacity utilization sometimes is as high as 89%, as against 60 to 61% for the overall Indian capacity utilization. I would say that the northeastern or eastern region right now has the lowest capacity, and we expect some of the key driver in terms of new capacity addition in this region. From here, I would hand over the presentation to Radhika. So over to you, Radhika.
Thank you, Ashish. Good afternoon, everyone. In terms of prices, the realizations were highest in the Northeast region at an average of about rupees 390 per bag during the first half of the year, followed by South and East, which were close at around 364 or 365 rupees a bag. In our next slide, we can see what has happened in this industry during FY17 and the current financial year. FY17 was severely impacted due to demonetization, wherein production and consumption dipped for the first time since 2012. When we see the regional impact, North was adversely impacted the most due to its high rural population, whereas South was more or less insulated with higher urbanization. FY18, though things have improved, it's not been in line with what was envisaged earlier. Demand has continued to remain weak. The GST implementation, the sand mining ban, labor shortage issues in the north and central India, and the RERA, which has impacted the real estate sector. Although the last quarter is generally a good one for the cement players, with all the increased construction, this year this has not been the case. 2019, we expect things to start picking up. In our next slide, we'll now take a look at the capacity additions and the investment outlays that has taken place in the sector and what can be expected over the next couple of years. As many of us know, cement is basically a cyclical industry, and it largely depends on the economic growth of the country. Projects have a large gestation period. Companies enhance capacities either through greenfield and brownfield expansions or through acquisitions. Generally, a greenfield project takes around 5 to 7 years, whereas a brownfield takes anywhere between 18 to 24 months for setting up. In terms of cost, the cost of a greenfield project without any waste heat recovery plant or railway sidings would be somewhere close to around rupees 6,000 to 7,000 per ton. In terms of capacity additions, around 150 million tons of capacity addition has been undertaken in the sector over the last 7 years. That is from 2011 to 2017. And close to 50 million tons is expected over the next couple of years. Huge expansions are expected in the south and east. The south, like always, is expected to see the highest capacity addition over the next couple of years, despite its capacity utilization levels remaining low. Investments are envisaged from players like Penna Cement, Shree Cement, Chettinad, KCP, among others. Few of the Expansions that we are most likely to see in the sector include Penna's recent capacity addition in Anantapur. Chettinad plans to set up a greenfield project in AP. Shree Cement is setting up an integrated cement plant in Karnataka, whereas NCL Industries has recently completed its capex. In the east, additions are envisaged from JSW Cement, Imami, and Shree. The additions in east is primarily backed by robust infrastructure development that's envisaged in this sector. West, north, and central is expected to have limited additions. Primarily, it will comprise of the Ultratech ramping up its capacity in the units acquired from JP. When we come to the investments in this sector, that's our next slide, the cement industry has always attracted high investments. With growing demand due to increased construction and infrastructure activities, aided by suitable government policy, the industry has also witnessed large investments from foreign players such as Lafarge Holcim. Around rupees 498 billion worth investment has been made in the sector during FY11 to 17. Investments in the previous year were close to rupees 88.5 billion, as against rupees 105 billion the previous year. And going forward, we expect close to about rupees 141 billion investments in this sector for the next couple of years, with the majority happening in the next year, that's FY19. In our next slide, we'll be touching upon certain peculiar characteristics that we see in the cement sector. Cement, being a bulky commodity, is unviable to transport across the country due to its high logistic cost, and hence it's localized. The industry is a fuel and power-intensive industry, which is required for its clinker grinding and its kiln firing, and is also one of the key cost components. Cement is also a capital-intensive industry. Expansion is generally a preferred route, as setting up a new plant costs almost thrice the cost of an expansion. As I said earlier, the demand for the industry is cyclical, and its nature is linked to GDP. It still continues to have a low substitute threat. It's one of the highly taxed industries of India. Though a lower GST slab was expected, cement continues to remain in one of the higher slabs of 28%. Sales for this industry are mostly retail sales, owing to its localized nature of industry, and depends on the dealer distribution network. In our next slide, we will try and understand the cost drivers for this industry. As we can see, the major cost drivers of cement are freight, followed by fuel and coal, raw material, employee and other expenses are the remaining. Logistics in the cement sector affect freight costs to a large extent. The basic raw materials for manufacturing cement, such as limestone and coal, are low value, high bulk material, and so result in huge freight cost. Freight is the single largest cost component, close to around 20 to 25% of its operating costs. Cement can be transported either through rail, road, or the sea route. Rail transport forms about 35% of the total cement dispatches and is cheaper than road transport if it's transported over large distances and in bulk. Also, companies benefit if they have their own wagons or railway sidings. Road transport is advantageous while transporting cement over short distances, as it does not involve any secondary freight and handling costs. This accounts for the major share of cement country. Sea transport is the cheapest among the three and is advantageous for companies having plants near coastal line and dedicated jetties. Next major cost driver is the power and fuel, which accounts for close to 15 to 20. Pet coke are primarily used for the cement industry. Cost of captive power can be much lower than grid power if such a plant is working on low cost and easily available fuel. Apart from cost, uninterrupted supply of quality power is also important for better operating efficiency. Companies using alternative fuels and setting up captive power generation are at an advantageous position here. The other major cost driver is the raw material. Raw material cost mainly consists of cost of limestone, gypsum, and fly ash, and it accounts for nearly 15 to 20% of the operating cost. As limestone requirement is substantial, the long-term mining rights that the company possesses with respect to the reserves for the company's current and future operations is very critical. Apart from royalty and lease rent, the cost of limestone is also dependent on its availability at surface level, quality of limestone, and the transportation charges to the plant location. Fly ash or slag is generally sourced from steel or power companies at relatively low price, and hence The cost of the same mainly includes of the transportation cost to the plant location. In order to maintain sufficient and timely supply of fly ash and slag, a lot of cement companies nowadays are looking at JVs with various power and steel companies. In our next slide, we will be seeing the cost analysis for a few of the major listed players that has been there in FY16 and 17. As we can see, the raw material cost was close to 18 to 20%. Power and fuel was at 17 to 18%, and freight was the largest cost component at around 24%. The operating margins of the major players have remained more or less stable during FY16 and FY17 at about 19.5 in 16 and 20.7 in 17. Net profit margin has also been stable at 7.5% for 16 and 7.9% for 17. We'll now be covering the factors impacting the credit profile of cement companies. The first factor is geography and market related. As I already touched upon earlier, cement is localized and it's bulky in nature, and the industry is influenced by regional rather than national demand-supply dynamics. Due to the varying level of infrastructure, real estate, and industrial development in different regions, companies operating in developing states and regions are better placed when compared to the others. Cement companies catering to a particular region may face concentration risk due to a decline in demand in that region, resulting in low capacity utilization. Hence, companies having multi-locational plants and pan-India presence are superior in terms of credit perspective. In terms of operational strength, companies with advanced systems resulting in production economies and new plants are preferred to old plants due to their low operating costs. As I said earlier, raw material and power and fuel are major cost drivers. So sourcing of raw material at economical cost is very important for the cement industry. Companies having cement plants near the limestone reserves with long-term mining rights is preferred. In terms of power and fuel, companies having their own captive plants operating at low cost and easily available fuel, or manufacturing units set up in low power tariff states have an edge over the others. Also, plants which can use multi-fuel types are more cost effective. Of late, companies also have split location plants, whereby clinkerization plants are near to the limestone reserve and grinding units are in proximity to the end user market. By adopting this strategy, companies can minimize their freight cost and also increase their geographical reach and cater to different markets. Branding is a relatively new concept in this industry, and it helps the company command a price premium. It also helps companies to maintain their market share during a bad phase. So companies which invest in advertising, marketing, and extensive dealer network to create a brand tend to benefit from it. The next factor that we see is the product mix. India was earlier mainly into the OPC category, that's the ordinary Portland cement. Gradually, it has now transitioned towards the blended cement. Blended cements like Portland Pozzolana cement, Portland Blast Furnace Slag cement have about 75% of the market share today, whereas OPC accounts for the balance. Blended cements command more margin and are hence preferred. If we look at the management quality, also plays a vital role in the industry, like all other companies. When it comes to capacity expansion, companies with enhanced capacities tend to enjoy economies of scale. Also, the management's past track record of executing projects with a judicious mix of debt and equity components and without any time or cost overrun is very critical. Government policies. The industry is susceptible to government actions, such as the recent ban on sign manning, which impacted the cement demand, the increase in import duty on pet coke. Companies with better operating efficiency, wide market access, and experienced management are generally at an advantageous position to deal with such situations. The financial strength and future cash flows of the companies are analyzed for the credit risk perspective. In our next slide, we will be touching upon the challenges that this industry has been facing of late. Increase in the fuel prices is one of the major challenges the cement industry has been facing. The prices of coal and pet coke have increased over the last few months tremendously. There's been an uncertainty with respect to the pet coke. In November last year, the Supreme Court banned pet coke use in few states around the NCR, that's the National Capital Region, in order to curb pollution. Though the restriction was relaxed later, it was followed by an import duty hike on pet coke from 2.5% to 10%. Increased demand and supply shortage is the main reason for the spike in the pet coke prices. Pet coke prices are close to 20% higher this quarter than December. The increase is due to the higher import duty and strong prices in the international market. Mining restrictions, such as the ban on the sand mining in the states of Bihar and others, have impacted various construction activities and hence the demand for cement. Slowdown in the housing sector has also been a major challenge. With the RERA coming in place, the housing activity has not increased as envisaged. Low capacity utilization level continues to remain a challenge for this industry. The industry is expected to operate at close to 60 to 65% in the next couple of years. Of late, the diesel prices have been rising, and this has in turn affected the freight and logistic cost for this industry. Increase in prices of other construction material also affect the demand for cement. When the prices of other material like steel increases, a lot of construction activity is put on halt, and hence the demand for the cement reduces. If you look at the rating dispersion of the care rated entities, majority of them are under the investment grade, and the ones which are under D are primarily have been unviable. I'll now request Mr. Milind to take over.
Thank you, Radhika. In conclusion, one can say that uptick in real estate sector and government spending on infrastructure will determine the prospects of the industry. Now we'll take a 2-minute break, and after that we'll take questions. Thank you.
Hi, with this way, we come to the end of the presentation, and as Milind sir said, we'll be taking a break of 2 minutes before we begin our Q&A session. You are please requested to start keying in the questions in the slide provided. Thank you. Hi friends, we are back and we'll be starting with the Q&A session. I'll just hand over to Ashish for taking the query.
So we have the first question from Aditya Gandhi. The question is, what are the growth prospects for Northeast region? Are JSW Imami and Shri looking to enter the region. So yes, Adit, like Radhika mentioned, both all three of these players have already been there in that region, and JSW is coming up with its new capacity in West Bengal, and Imami and Shri too are looking to enter. So there would be some immediate capacity addition in the next 2 to 3 years in this region. In terms of growth prospects, I think Eastern region, like we mentioned during the presentation, has one of the lowest overall capacity installed if you compare it with the other four regions. So yeah, it is going to be driven by both a mix of retail as well as infrastructure demand. So yes, in terms of growth prospects for the North region, there definitely is a high scope for growth. Our next question is, how will the industry cope with the increase in prices of pet coke and its shortfall? I think Radhika would be taking this question, and this question is from Sagar Shah. Over to you, Radhika.
Yeah, so the increase in pet coke prices have impacted the cement margins. However, we expect the realizations to also improve. So though the margins may not be as significant as they were earlier, the players will still make some margin. And as to the previous question that Aditya has asked, if you see infrastructure in the Northeast, the Union Cabinet has also recently approved the introduction of the new central sector scheme for Northeast special infrastructure development in 17-18 with 100% funding from the central government to fill the gaps for creation of good infrastructure. The road upgradation programs with the special accelerated road development program Northeast is also expected to impact the demand drivers in that region.
Our next question is from Ravi, and the question is sand mining and the impact still affecting consumption? So I think sand mining as an issue has been impacting the markets, especially in the state of Tamil Nadu, Kerala, and Uttar Pradesh, Bihar, and a bunch of northern states actually. Even Punjab has been affected. So, if I'm right, on the 20th of March, the government of India has come out with some guidelines in terms of sand mining, and they are trying to come out with basic guidelines for the states so that they could implement some basic framework and rule for sand mining. So this is going to help. I don't think there is going to be a very sudden knee-jerk reaction from the governments, because once there is a ban on sand mining, it impacts the cement industry pretty in a very high manner. So I think these guidelines would be implemented over a period of time. So it is going to take some time, and the government definitely is trying to curb illegal sand mining, and at the same time, they are trying to legalize the whole process. So yes, the it is I think the sand mining issue is more or less done. The state governments have relaxed sand mining over the last few months, and the issue has more or less subsided across states. Once these guidelines are implemented, the system would be more regulated. So I don't see any very quick impact in the time to come, at least for the next 1.5 years.
Our next question is from Vinay Kedia. Which are the top companies and how are smaller players placed in terms of market share and competition? The top companies of the sector would obviously include, like Ashish said, Ultratech with the highest capacity of 93 million tons. Your ACC Ambuja of the whole sim follows next. Then you have Shree Cements, you have JSW, you have Birla Corporation, JK Lakshmi. These are among the few big companies. And as we already said in our presentation, in terms of market share, the top 10 companies of the sector have about 65% of the market share. So the smaller players, to be viable, they generally should have backward integration, mines close to their units. They should be using captive power plants in order to sustain.
We have another question on the percentage of gross capacity, which is split across locations in terms of clinker and grinding units as separate. And this question is from Mr. Albert Da Costa. So, would you be able to take this, Radhika? Do we have some data on this?
In terms of clinker, we won't, specifically for split capacities, we won't be able to give the exact data. We'll have the capacity only for cement.
We have another question from Mr. Manish, and the question is about a post destocking restocking exercise of GST. What have been the cement price trends across markets in India? Over to you, Radhika.
Can you repeat the question?
Post destocking restocking exercise of GST, what have been the cement price trends across markets in India?
GST basically has not impacted the cement prices largely because cement was anyway getting taxed at a higher band of about 27 to 29% earlier. Now it falls under the GST of 28%. So as such, what was earlier envisaged as a price impact has not actually happened.
We have another question from Mr. Albert De Costa, and the question is what percentage of cement sales are under bulk, non branded categories as compared to retail branded categories? I think we spoke during the presentation that cement in India, I think it is more branded as of now. So we have the Ultratex and the ACC Holcim or the Holcim group in totality and the Birlas having the major share in terms of almost 65% is controlled by the top 10 players. So I would say even when it comes to production, something in the similar lines is what is in the branded category, and the rest of it is non-branded. So more or less, the branded would be concentrated towards the retail sale, and the non-branded goes to institutional or the bulk sales. So it is going to be a 65% in the branded category, and the rest of it in the non-branded category. We'll take one more question. This question is from Mr. Amish Agarwal, and the question is how much viability is in use of renewable alternate energy for the sector, considering that petcoke cal prices are volatile. So as of now, it is very difficult to define how much of renewable energy is used by the sector. Some of the major players have set up some capacity in terms of which will be very less as of now. So maybe a couple of megawatts, that's the capacity. But in terms of production, it is still not something which is being used because we have quite a lot of captive capacity, captive power being used by the players, and others are using it from the grid. And the second thing is that they need continuous power for cement production, which is something renewable energy is not yet being able to provide because the storage for renewable energy is still not something which is implemented in India. So in terms of viability, I don't think right now major players are focusing at the moment of powering their cement plants through renewable energy capacity.
We have another question from Mr. Albert De Costa. What is the demand growth for blended cement as compared to OPC category? As we said earlier, blended cement today has a market share of close to 75%, followed by OPC. So the basic cement growth that we expect will primarily come from this category, which will be somewhere close to 3 to 5% CAGR growth over the next couple of years. We have another question from Mr. Albert, which says, is coastal shipping being used by south-based players to attend to Western India markets? Yes, coastal shipping has gradually picked up. Recently, we had one of the cement players from south, which has been transporting cement by this basis.
Fine. I think by this was the last question we had taken up, and we come to an end of this Q&A session. Thank you again for being a part of this Care Ratings webinar. We hope the discussion was insightful, and we really look forward to your participation in future also. For further any suggestions, feedback, queries, you can please write to us. The feedback and suggestion box will be appearing in the email no sooner the webinar ends. Thank you and goodbye for now.